What if the way you relate to others at home, at work, even under stress, was silently shaping your leadership story? My guest today, Dr. Jaime Goff, says it is. She's here to show us how uncovering your attachment style can transform not just how you lead, but how you live. If you've ever wondered why certain patterns keep showing up in your relationships, or how to finally lead and live with security and trust, you won't want to miss this conversation. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and leadership coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Jaime Goff. Jaime is the founder of the Empathic Leader, where she specializes in helping leaders unlock their full potential through executive coaching, insightful workshops, and thought-provoking keynotes. She also serves as a director of leadership development for an international healthcare system, where she designs and leads innovative programs that inspire leaders to thrive. With over 25 years of experience as a psychotherapist, professor, and executive coach, Jaime is passionate about helping leaders craft empowering stories that help them become more secure. This topic is the focus of her new book, which we are going to dive into, The Secure Leader: Discover the Hidden Forces That Shape Your Leadership Story and How to Change Them. When Jaime's not empowering others, which she's doing a lot, you'll find her hiking with her husband, spending time with her dog and cat, painting, or building Lego sets. I love that. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on this book. This is a big deal. I know what goes into them, and I also really appreciated you writing about to inspire everyone to go in the direction of their yearnings and their dreams. Like, you thought about doing this for a long time.
I did.
And you're like, there's so many books that are out there, and there's this one, like, and then you did it.
Yes. Yeah, I did. Like so many of us, I think, that eventually write books, we all deal with a little bit of imposter syndrome, if you will, where, we doubt whether or not we really have something valuable to add to the conversation. And I think I just finally got to the point where I was like, you know what? It's more for me in some ways. I mean, it's for other people, but also it's just a goal I've always wanted to achieve. And like, if no one reads it, that's okay. I'll be happy that I wrote it.
Well, people are going to read it, and someone did read it. I read it, and I know many people.
Thank you.
Many people are going to read it, and I think I share the experience of when I have written and when I think about future writing. The thought that comes is, there are so many books in this area, or there's so many like this, or I would just be adding to what's already out there. But as I have learned, and what you point out, is we all bring our unique perspective and experience to any topic. And we're going to talk about the piece that you especially wanted to bring in and did bring in, which is not in most of the leadership books. But before we do that, I wanted to learn more about, you got your doctorate in marriage and family therapy.
Yes.
And then you moved on to executive coaching. So I wanted to hear from you a little bit about your development and what led you to the first and then to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I'm a first generation college student in my family, so first person to get a college degree, and honestly, I I went to a very small college where there weren't a lot of options in terms of what you were going to major in, and one of them was psychology, which I was interested in, and so I decided to major in psychology. And I knew, my professors let me know that really, if you want to do something in this world, you have to go to graduate school. if you want to, if you want a career
with psychology,
in
yes,
psychology,
that happens
right?
to be true.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, exactly. So I decided to just go on, and I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy because I took some classes in family systems and really enjoyed those courses as an undergrad. And then I was like, well, I'm good at school. I don't have a lot of other obligations demanding my time and attention right now. So I'm just going to keep going. So kept going, got my PhD, and I really did want to teach. I was really interested in that. I really looked up to all of my professors and valued so much what I learned from them. And I also kind of knew that I enjoyed kind of doing therapy, practicing clinically, but I like to have a number of, irons in the fire, if you will. So I thought, well, I'll get my PhD and then I can also teach and I can also supervise. And that's why I decided to go that route at the time and just finish it and get it
Mm-hmm.
done. And so I was a professor for 10, 11 some years. Well, professor, and then also moved into administrative roles at the university I was teaching at. Um, my last role in the higher education world, I was an academic dean for one of the colleges at my university, and I enjoyed that, and it was a lot of fun. I was really responsible for getting all of our programs accredited
Mm.
with.
That sometimes is not fun, actually, from my
It
experience.
takes a certain, fun's probably not quite the right
Yeah.
word. It takes a certain skill set, I
Yes.
think, to do it, which, I have. I was very successful at that. But, I kind of start to itch
Yeah.
every like 5 to 7 years for a new challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I had dabbled a bit in some leadership development spaces just through opportunities that came through the university, through some of the centers that we had, and kind of started to apply some of my knowledge from the world of, psychology and counseling to what I was teaching, new leaders. And I would go in and work with like churches and church leadership teams, and I was like, okay, this applies. This makes sense. Like family systems, just human systems in general, relationship dynamics. This is all at play in the realm of leadership too. And so I wanted to explore that more, and went back to school, did an executive or a certificate in executive coaching, then ended up leaving the university to start my own business. Did that for a while, through a number of events, decided to find a full-time job, and ended up at Chris's Health, where I'm currently working in leadership development and doing some internal coaching there. So yeah, but
Awesome. The evolution, and something that we talk a lot about on the show is pivoting
mhm,
and growing, right? Pivoting and continuing to grow. And one thing always leads to the next, but it's not always clear until we look in hindsight how
yes,
all the pieces move together. I really appreciate the itch. I get the itch. I need to do a variety of different things as well. So I share your experience there.
yeah,
And and a book. And right, so this is like the next thing for you as now author, which is just such a huge feat to get a piece of work out there to
mm,
market, to promoting what we're doing right now. And
yeah,
so I want to take a moment and celebrate that,
yeah. Thank
because it's
you.
something to be celebrated. Attachment is this
Yes,
piece that
hmm
you uniquely are bringing in to the leadership, executive coaching space. And I know that you share about learning about your own attachment style, bringing the personal in with the professional. So if you
hmm
could share what that awareness was, and then we'll talk a little bit about what this attachment thing is, and
yeah,
how that impacted your life in a way that you are using it to impact others.
absolutely, yeah. Yes. So as I was, I was involved in like research and clinical, treatment, kind of using attachment based therapies from the time I was in my PhD program throughout my career. And so it was something that obviously I was deeply steeped in terms of the reading and research that existed out there. And so through that, I came to learn about my own attachment style, which I would say for the most of the time, most of the population has a secure attachment style. However, we do tend to, when we're overwhelmed, when we're under stress, we tend to kind of shift into maybe some more unhealthy attachment seeking behaviors. And I tend to lean toward the avoidant attachment style when I'm under stress, when I'm in conflict with other people. And so I started noticing that as I was learning about this in my studies and in my research, I started noticing that in myself, just in my relationship with family members, with my husband, that, oh, okay, this is why I behave the way I do when things get hard and when there's conflict. This is why I tend to, withdraw and, shut down and not want to engage with what's happening in the moment. And then when I first moved into a leadership role, I was I don't, I was still very young. I think I maybe was, I don't know, maybe 33, 34 when I became a department chair. And I remember I had an assistant, an administrative assistant for the first time, of course, in my career. And I did not let her do anything. I was so controlling. Would not let her schedule meetings for me. I just really devalued her
Mm.
in ways I think at the time I initially really wasn't aware of, until she came to me and she said, "Jamie, you have to let me do my job." And I was so, well, probably not in the moment. In the moment, if I was probably a little defensive. But as I look back, I'm so grateful to her for the courage that she had to say that to me, because it brought into my awareness that avoidant kind of attachment tendency that I had was showing up in the way I was at work, and showing up in the way that I was leading my team, and specifically with her, and wanting to hold really tightly to control and not empowering and trusting other
Mm.
people to do their jobs and to do them well. So that was really eye-opening for me, and kind of one of the first, just slaps in the face really about, like, okay, how this
Mm.
is showing up in my own life.
Fascinating how our relationship patterns aren't always segregated, and often are not segregated or isolated. And how we are in relationship in our family of origin with our, if siblings. With, I mean, it does generalize, and I know we all know there's
Mhm.
various variations and some code switching that happens in different environments. But as you point out, and a cornerstone of your work is helping people understand. And again, this is where there's this bridge. I really like how like your book for me shows the psychotherapist in you
Mm.
melded with the executive leadership coach in you, right? And we are taught in the two fields to leave them separately, and there is some overlap. And yet, it's so critical for us
Mm.
to know thyself as
Mhm.
leaders. If we do not know thyself, we are going to be carrying out unconsciously unconscious behaviors, unconscious motivations, and unconscious relationship patterns, which actually get in the way of our goals.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. 100%. And I completely agree with you. How we are in relationships is absolutely not segregated. For the most part, you can see many of the same patterns in the way that you relate to your friends, your family members, your intimate partners, your team members, your colleagues. So yes, I see a lot of consistency,
Hmm.
across the board. And, I do have that, straddling both worlds, you know, and I'm no longer, I don't practice therapy anymore, but it informs me. And I
Hmm.
honestly, I don't know how to keep them, again, because I don't think we could I don't think we're great at segregating
No,
ourselves.
no.
So I don't really know how to completely separate those worlds from one another. But I just feel like self-awareness is, like you said, such a fundamental part of being able to identify, the problematic patterns and behaviors that we're playing out. And so many times that those come from a very deep place.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And understanding where they come from provides insight that helps us to move forward.
Awareness and insight, right? You just said
Mhm.
two of, I think, among the most critical words for evolving as a human, in our personal life and our professional lives.
Mhm.
And you have also pointed out, which I completely agree, that the traditional leader ship has sailed. We don't have the same workforce. We don't have the same work expectations. This was changing before 2020 and the
Mhm.
pandemic, and accelerated even more with the newer generations. Like, each generation is so different with what
Mhm.
they expect. And I know people have lots of different views about that, but regardless, it is what it is. And so if you're going to manage the current workforce in a successful way, it really is who you are, which we are arguing is more impactful than the tools that were once
Yes.
the sort of the benchmark of effective leadership.
Mhm. Yeah. 100%. And, the tools are helpful, and they can be really effective in the hands of a, self-aware, insightful, secure leader.
Hmm.
But in the hands of a leader who lacks self-awareness, who lacks insight, who doesn't have a good understanding of themselves and who they are, in my experience, the same tools aren't nearly as effective because the way they're being implemented is not ideal.
Hmm.
So
Yes. So hear that, everyone. And it's the same thing as I was also reading the book and the concepts, and spending so much of my life doing both the coaching and the psychotherapy, and spending so much time doing parenting work over the years. It was just, you can replace leader and parent. I mean, these are the same attachment style. Knowing your attachment style, because that's how it's going to be with your employees. It's how it's going to be with your children. Like,
mhm.
the what's so wonderful about this, it's a if you do the work, it impacts every facet of your life.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And, when I was first kind of moving into the world of coaching from, the therapy world, and part of my interest in that was what I noticed, and I think this has also changed because it's probably been 10 years or so since I've really been in clinical practice
Hmm.
practicing therapy. And now I think people are much more open about their need for therapy, and it's much more accepted. But still, when I was practicing, again, there was a little bit of a shame for whatever reason, right, attached to it. And then oftentimes, as I worked with couples and families primarily, by the time they showed up in my therapy office, things were so far gone because they had waited so long.
Hmm.
They had been sweeping things under the rug, avoiding the conflict, denying that there were problems for such a long time that by the time they came to see me, those maladaptive patterns and those behaviors were so entrenched, it was really challenging to begin to undo all of that and
Hmm.
to, rework the system. And so, honestly, when I started, getting into coaching, I thought, well, maybe, and this is where it connects, that maybe people won't be as defensive in a work concept to kind of, dig into themselves, and because it's not, the stakes are a little different.
Hmm.
And so my hope was, and because I believe this to be true, right? If I am helping people grow as leaders, become more secure leaders, then I'm also helping them be better partners, be better parents, be better friends.
Hmm.
And so I, hopefully, again, because I just don't think we exist in distinct boxes, growth in
Yeah,
one area is going to, bleed into growth in others.
I completely agree with you. I think among the most rewarding aspects of my coaching work is when people talk about the positive impact the work that we're doing is having on their personal life. They'll just bring that in.
Hmm.
And so it just, yeah, to add to your point, it's just for anyone doing the work impacts all areas of your life in ways that are obvious and at other times just subtle because you show up differently. And just from an energetic perspective, I have one client talk to me about how there's a relationship different with his parents that he
Mm-hmm.
hadn't been spending all that much time with. And I asked, like, well, what are you doing differently? And it was more about just the work that we were doing on presence and awareness. He was just bringing that into those interactions. And he said, as a result, felt there was change within them. Right. And this is for leaders with their employees as well. We show up differently, and all of a sudden, someone
Hmm.
steps into a situation differently just because we have shifted.
Yes. And that's systems theory, right?
Hmm.
Only
Yep.
one part of the system changes and it can change the entire system.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So the secure leader. So tell us what is that secure leader that we are seeking to be?
So the secure leader is someone who both sees their own, like deeply and fundamentally believes in their own worth and value as a human being. So that makes them grounded, right, in their own sense of who they are in relationship to other people. It helps them be present. They're not seeking, in a kind of desperate way, seeking approval or validation, although we all need that to some extent. It's not like a desperate seeking for that because, I believe that I'm worthy. I am worthy and I have dignity as a human being because because I exist. And then the other side of that is a secure leader trusts, starts from a place of trust with
Hmm.
other people. So a fundamental trust or belief in, other people's desire to do good, to be good. And because of that, is able to empower and delegate and, provide opportunity and growth to other people. So it's that, part of it is about the self and how the secure leader feels about him or herself and their own groundedness and their identity. And then the other side of that is how they feel about other people, how they interact with other people from either a place of kind of trust, which is secure, or mistrust, which is a more insecure
Hmm.
approach.
And we know that our attachment styles do come from our early experiences with generally our
Hmm.
primary caretaker or caretakers. And so this is something we come by honestly, and we couldn't all choose our experiences.
Right.
Um, but we know from the work that um, most people can change over time with the awareness. They can become more secure when they're insecure. They can become less anxious if they have an anxious attachment
Hmm.
um, from doing this work and having this awareness, but with compassion, right? Compassion of like we all are who we are for reasons, right? And I think it's acknowledging that and accepting it
Hmm.
with that level of awareness so we can do what you talk about is like we can't rewrite a new story unless we know the story that we have in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And I think the compassion is so important because if we begin by being compassionate with ourselves and really understanding, like, oh, this is why I act this way, or this is why I engage with my team in this way. I never made this connection before. And you develop empathy for yourself. And when you
Hmm.
develop empathy for yourself, then you're more able to give it to other people and have compassion for others because then you become curious. So you see where these patterns have come about for you. And then when you're interacting with other people, when they do something that you're like, what were they thinking? What are they
Mm-hmm.
doing? Why are they acting this way?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to more naturally approach that with curiosity and
Right.
compassion and wonder,
Right.
like, I
Right.
wonder what's behind that for them.
Yes. And I know I say this from time to time on the shows because I think it's so important. You and just triggered this memory is when it comes to trauma, for example, people do a lot of different things that we don't realize why they're doing because of traumatic reactions or triggers. And I always think and talk about of Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry's book that's called "What Happened to You," with the underlying question to be for us to think about not what's wrong with you, which is the usual question we
Mhm.
ask at all levels, medical and personal. What happened to you? And I just think you just gave a softer version of that, which is
Yeah.
to be curious and try to understand. Um, and I think of another client coaching experience where um, this person had an employee that seemed to be there was more like controlling and maybe challenging happening. And when we talked about got in it, we could see that it was more of a person coming from a place of fear and
Mhm.
worry, and that like that was the reaction to that those environmental stressors that were happening. And
Mhm.
it creates space as a leader to say, huh, okay, maybe there's another way I can come at this and understand that. And then
Mhm.
just react with our own messaging.
Yeah. Because yeah, and I think with that example that you just shared too, most of the time what you see on the surface is not the real issue, right? Or
Hmm.
the emotion that you see on the surface, whether it's frustration or anger, someone's lashing out or being very controlling. Like you said, there's usually something else underneath of that fear
Hmm.
or worry or, you know, feeling inadequate, right? There are other emotions that exist underneath of that, if we react to the surface emotion, that
Hmm.
might not go so well. But if
Hmm.
we as leaders, especially, and we see that in our team members, if we try to dig a little deeper and find out what's below that, it does. It's a lot. It tends to be softer, more
Yeah.
vulnerable
Hmm.
experience that you can. Again, it's easier to have compassion.
Yes. And the point about connection and
Mhm.
caring, right? This can't be overstated. Like it's to me, in my experience, it's like it's everything is having that relationship with the people who work with you, who work for you, that they know that you care about them, and that they matter. Like, it's amazing. It's just amazing how people can be and flourish under those environments, especially compared to the opposite. And it makes me think of I can't think of the name of the woman on this podcast related to the Harvard Business Review or their podcast. And she was talking about you need to love your employees. And people are like, you need to love your employees. And her definition of love is high standards with compassionate support.
Hmm.
That's her work definition of love, which I thought that's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if I've heard that specifically, but I've heard Brene Brown say that too.
Mm,
That you need to love your employees, and I think, and I don't remember which podcast I heard her
yeah.
say this on, but she went a step further and she said, and you really want to try to find something that you like about each person that is on your team, that you
Yeah.
genuinely like and admire about them,
Mhm.
to kind of fuel that love, right? Love can be, in some ways, in the way that you defined it, a choice that you're making to
Mhm.
love them despite, you know, despite their
Yeah.
challenges. But then also just really trying to figure out like what is it that I do deeply like and appreciate about this person.
Mhm.
And because those are the environments where people thrive and they flourish when they feel that in a genuine way.
Totally. And that is also reminding me of early work by Dr. Bruce Perry, who's an amazing clinician and authority on trauma, as particularly
Mhm.
childhood trauma. And I remember seeing him speak, gosh, 20 plus years ago. And it was about in a child abuse prevention seminar. And he was talking about the difference of these particular kids who were emotionally abused. They were like malnourished, emotionally abused. And he talked about taking this child and when they go into placement A, which a better situation, and then have all of this different therapeutic care and all of these different treatments and or putting them in a situation with a loving, caring, and what he was like calling more like a grandmotherly, loving foster parent. And he showed pictures of the difference
Mm.
of just being in a loving, not just, I'm going to say, but being in a loving
Yeah.
environment and how there's a flourishing. And that is the same things we see with employees, of course, which is
Mhm.
something is punitive or we're withholding or we don't realize how our own baggage, our own stress is impacting the relationship, like you said, from your experience early on. And if we can make these shifts, like our job as leaders is to bring out the best in the people who we work with and who work for us, like to bring out the best. And this seems so simple, but it still is something that people,
Mm.
I think, have to be taught, or at times
Mhm.
it doesn't come naturally to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is where, sometimes understanding like what your attachment style is and especially, what it looks like when you are under stress or when you're feeling overwhelmed because that's where things often can break down. And so even if you are a really compassionate and caring leader, when things are high stakes, when there's a lot of volatility, which, of course, in every industry there is so much volatility that we're facing every single day, that's when it really matters that you show up in a way that is compassionate and caring. And that's when it's hard to
Hmm.
do that, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's when our own triggers and our own kind of reactive, unhealthy patterns start to come out. And so that's where, as leaders, we really need to do the work on ourselves so that we can continue to show up in that way, even during volatility and stress, because that's when our people need it the most.
Yes. So it's about knowing our dominant attachment
Hmm.
story, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so you have so many tools in the book to help people. So say a little bit about how you see doing the work to help a person first uncover what their dominant attachment
Hmm.
story is.
Hmm. Yeah, and part of that is just really looking with, open eyes at your life experiences. And sometimes we don't remember, right? We don't have
Hmm.
explicit memories of some really significant things we experienced early on in our lives because our brain wasn't capable of creating explicit memories in the first 18 months of life. But a lot happens during that time where we're taking in all types of, emotional and kind of sensing information to understand how the world around us works and whether or not people are trustworthy, based again on how our caregivers are responding to us. And so you may not have explicit memories of the things that happen, but by looking at how you show up in current situations, you can get an understanding of that. And so in the book, I have, a lot of reflection questions, just, describing what that looks like. If you, lean toward the insecure, anxious end of the continuum, then what does that look like in your behavior as an adult? What are some things you may have experienced as a child? And then how do you make sense of that? How do you make meaning of that? And how was that protective for you? And that's one of the
Hmm.
things I really like to emphasize for people is that these attachment styles, insecure, anxious, insecure, avoidant, on the other end of the continuum, they were protective strategies that served a really important purpose at some point in your life when you didn't have other means of dealing with, of coping with the things that were happening around you.
Hmm.
However, those stories, those that you're telling yourself, those ways of being, those ways of behavior, it may not be serving you well anymore. And so, what are the ways in which these things aren't, how did it protect you at one time? And how is it not serving you well any longer? And then also, like, maybe there are some things that are still serving you well, and that's okay too. So I have a lot of reflection questions, and it
Hmm.
does take time. They're not easy or quick questions. If you read the book, so
Yes, yes.
they're not things that you can get through quickly, but they are really deep, reflective questions. And there are also some assessments that you can take to get a better idea of that. I have one in the book. I have one on my website that can help pinpoint kind of where you fall. So that is the first step, is kind of developing that awareness, understanding where some of these behaviors might have come from in your own life and your own experience.
Hmm.
And then once you have that awareness, you know where you need to make changes and tweak things, so that your story, whatever it is, whatever you're telling yourself, serves you better.
And you also do have a journal, which you can talk about at the end of the show
Yes.
for people to
Yeah.
get that as well, to
Hmm.
really help guide them through this process and even
Yes.
in a deeper way. So it's really, yeah, it's really, it's a process. You outline the process that you do with your clients, so
Hmm.
others, the masses, can take this on too and see the
Yeah.
benefits. I was intrigued. I hadn't heard of this work from Keegan and Leahy from Harvard on
Mm.
an everyone culture.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool, like really cool. So say a little bit about this and what they talk about the holding environment. So it's like the idea of leader and like a secure leader you talk about is often akin to a transformational leader,
Mhm.
which I very much relate to. And now this everyone culture, this holding environment, it's so different than the old school leadership style, which tended to be a more authoritarian and at times punitive, right? So leadership as a holding environment. That's just, I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah. I love an everyone culture. I mean, it's an older book. I can't remember now off the top of my head publication date, but maybe late 90s,
Oh wow,
early.
that I had not
Yeah.
heard of it.
I mean, it's been out there for a while, but it's one of my favorites. I absolutely love it, because I think that book, when I first read it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is what secure leaders do with their teams, right? And so they talk about this idea of a holding environment is a place where people, like, when they come into that environment, people are accepted for all that they are in that moment. So their strengths, their limitations, their fears, their anxieties, but, or maybe I should say, and they're not necessarily permitted to stay there. And that's one of the things that I really love about it, because I think they paint this beautiful picture of how, as leaders, we can both be compassionate and provide a safe space for people to innovate and fail and take risks and learn from their mistakes. But you don't get to stay where you are today. You have to grow.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we're going to be compassionate and accepting and, provide that psychological safety, if you will. But you also have to be invested in your own growth. And we're going to push you and we're going to challenge you. But we're going to provide an environment in which it's safe for
Yes.
you to be
Right.
tested and to be challenged and
Right.
to grow and to do something different. So, that's kind of in a very small nutshell, what
Yeah,
what
I
they
love
talk
that.
about
And again, it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's like a work definition of love. A
there.
work
Yeah.
definition of
Hmm.
love is where I'm going to accept you for who you are, and I'm going to have these expectations for you to grow
Hmm.
because I believe you can, and that's what we need. Like it's for you and it's for us.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's just striking me too that it's, again, I think relationships are just so parallel regardless
Yeah.
of the setting, because that's parenting too, right?
Hmm. When my first leadership role was very young, like you, I kind of fell into it by
Hmm.
default. Joined a organization, and then the leader went away for a reason. And then my executive director said, "So Dan, here's the deal. Either you are the director of this program, or I'm going to hire another one." I was like, "Whoa, well, I certainly don't want another one like the past one, and I'm not ready. I don't think I'm ready." But so through some different methods, I stepped into it. And what I learned from him, he was a full relationship based leader, and he would say, with a few with a few exceptions, anything can be figured out. Like anything can be figured out through communication and relationship, even if figured out means ultimately this is not a good fit and we're going to have to make a decision. I had always thought, as being someone who historically was more conflict avoidant as well, that those hard conversations were just too difficult, and I didn't want to step into them. And what I learned over time is those hard conversations, when done with compassion, done with integrity and with alignment, they are like the most effective, the most helpful, and the most change-oriented conversations, whether you're helping the person grow, or you are helping them learn and find relief because it wasn't a good situation for them as well.
Yeah. And yeah, I love that. And in fact, I agree with you. I mean, I think when you're having to give challenging feedback, or, when you're having conflict with someone, those can be the conversations that really enrich the relationship. Again, if it's done well, they can really enrich the relationship. They don't, and I think we have this expectation that they're going to damage the relationship. But yeah, done well, they can absolutely change the trajectory of, of someone's career or someone's life.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I really have come to appreciate more and more in this work with leadership, on the leadership side, is just it's about being human, right? It's about being human in that role that you are as leader. And I think that's what you're talking about, especially when you go back to attachment at the core and changing one's story. It gives me so much hope, because I've always felt there's so much possibility for human growth on an individual, and I will still hold on a group collective level. With all that is going on these days, there's just trying to keep the hope of individual and collective growth. And that makes me think of a awesome quote that you put in, which is attributed to Viktor Frankl, which I want to which is so powerful. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. For those of you who know of the book, from the concentration camp, a psychiatrist, he writes, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness."
One of my favorite quotes.
I'm going to add the one that you put in from Carl Jung, because we also end up talking. It's interesting how much Carl Jung comes up on this podcast. Another brilliant individual. I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like I like feel that as I read those words from your pages. And this is the opportunity for everyone to know, regardless of the situation that we find ourselves in, that you are in, there is opportunity, even if there's just a sliver, right? Like just a sliver of light or a sliver of space. It's to start wedging your way through to something different and choose who you want to be and how you want to be.
And I love that metaphor, that even if there's just a sliver, you can get something in there. You don't need much space, right? To wedge yourself in and start making that sliver bigger.
Yes.
And letting more and more light into that. Yeah.
The stimulus and the response also makes me think of Stephen Covey in the eighth habit, after the 7 habits of highly effective people. In the beginning, he talked about, I always remembered this, he talked about the stimulus and the response. And maybe this is where what came to me, not so consciously, is this idea. He said that between stimulus and response, there is space. And the width of the space is actually what distinguishes successful people from less successful people. Because if we can take time to pause and to reflect, which I'm moving us into the emotional intelligence work that you talk about, then we have more time to make a thought out and reflective decision. But those who just react, obviously with the impulse, it usually does not go as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. That the longer that space is, the more you can really focus on widening that space between stimulus and response, the more successful you're going to be, the more effective you're going to be as a leader, and the more your team is going to benefit from that. And you're going to benefit from it
Right.
across all areas of your
Everyone
life.
benefits. Everyone
Yeah,
does.
absolutely.
So the goal with being the secure leader,
Mhm.
and also thinking about it in terms of being integrated, like
Yeah.
aware, insightful, as you talked about, and integrated. You talk about helping people go from being reactive to regulated,
Mhm.
from disconnected to connected, and from disintegrated to integrated. So it's very holistic, this
Yes.
idea. It makes me just think of becoming. It's like this
Mhm.
idea
Yeah,
of
it really is.
becoming.
Yeah. Yeah, and from reactive to regulated is all about, if you want to, think about it in terms of emotional intelligence too, that's about that self-management, right? Like, how big is the space between your trigger and your response, and how can you begin to widen it? What are some of the strategies you can use to regulate your own emotional responses more effectively, so that you are being intentional and making choices instead of just being whipped around by whatever's happening in the moment. And then moving from disconnected to connected, I really don't think you cannot be a secure leader in isolation. You can't have secure attachment in isolation. Attachment means relationship, right?
Right.
And so, you might be able to manage yourself fine if you're like living on an island all by yourself or in a cabin up in the woods all by yourself and never interact with other people, but you're not secure. And so the importance of relationships, not only for us as leaders, so that we can maintain our own sense of security, because security exists in that tension between risk and safety,
Hmm.
that letting people know who we are, see our mistakes, while also having, some assurance that people accept us for who we are. That's really important that we cultivate those types of relationships in our own lives as leaders, because they provide our own holding environment,
Hmm.
if you will. But then also, learning how to do that more effectively with your team members so that you're more attuned to their experiences and you're listening more attentively to what they're sharing with you. And then, finally, the third step, moving from disintegrated to integrated, is kind of bringing it all together. And that's really a meaning making piece. Like, how do I understand myself as a whole person who has had all these experiences in my life, but who is also working to change and to become continually better and to become more secure? And how can I write a narrative for myself that makes sense of all of that for me? And then also, how can I integrate all of my experience so that I am aligned and I'm consistent
Hmm.
in the way that I'm showing up?
Well said. Well said. Alignment and acting in integrity.
Mm,
It's this sometimes this elusive, subjective
mm,
concept, but we all know it when we're in alignment and when we are acting in integrity. It's like a flowing of in my experience, it's a
mm,
flowing of thought, of action, of energy, of presence, and it's this state where we're not having to find a script. We're not having to find an angle. It's like it's coming from this place of belief and groundedness.
mhm,
Um, and that's where I think the power is in finding that for ourselves and staying in it as much as possible. And of course,
mhm.
particularly in times of stress, which
Yeah.
will happen in any leadership or life
Mhm.
situation.
Yeah.
Okay, as we're winding down here, let's talk about the power of positive emotion, as you talk about at the
Mhm.
end, and
Yeah.
how important that is in the work as well, and in
Yeah.
life. In life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, even, for those of us who have earned security, we've become more secure in the way that we relate to other people and to ourselves. We still have to work to maintain that, right? Because things happen to us. There are a lot of things that happen that are outside of our control. There are always going to be things that, want to force us into anxious or avoidant behaviors. So we have to work to maintain that. And one of the, I talk about Barbara Fredrickson and her work in the broaden and build theory of positive emotion. And positive emotion is incredibly powerful. And it doesn't just help us like get out of stressful situations. It actually protects us from experiencing stress and overwhelm in the first place. When we really cultivate positive emotion in our lives and savor it and look for ways to experience positivity in our lives. And so, there are a number of things you can do to really find positive emotion. I said savor. One of the things we can do is practice savoring. And you can practice it as a meditative type of practice, but it can also just be like, I want to hold on to this moment and appreciate what's happening right here in front of me. And it can be savoring from any of your five senses, but it brings joy to you when you savor something in the moment. And it can be, evaluating your day and looking at, again, gratitude and, what are the things that brought me joy during that day, so that you are intentionally creating situations in which you experience positive emotion, because it's a protective factor for you in helping to maintain security.
Mm. Yes, savor and awe. Um, in terms of savoring, our youngest, who's in college, sent my wife and I a TikTok video that this woman was reading. It seems like maybe on her podcast, with a wonderful accent. Sounded like a English or Australian accent, and it was about a woman who is 80 who happens to wake up one day and she's 40 with the little hands that are grabbing at her sheets, and she looks in the mirror and all of a sudden she is 40 and she had one day that she got to do over again,
Mm,
and how she would savor and appreciate the arguments, the yelling, the crumbs in the car, the chaos. And it's like holding on to those moments because life just moves fast,
mhm,
and particularly when there's a lot happening. And so that was just really timely. And so I really appreciate what you're saying, and so much about the origin of this show, about really like seizing it now, and like this is what we have, so like let's make the most of it.
yeah.
So positive emotion and savoring, I think, is a really I think of, say, people who love foodies are just
Mm.
savoring the bite, savoring the smells, and how do we do that just in regular everyday life?
Yeah. And you can savor, like with the example you gave, things in the past, or like what you're experiencing in the present, or even, things that you're anticipating in the future. And for me, one of the things that um, I like to do, I have a box. I talk about this in the book, but I have a box in which I have all of the cards my husband and I have given each other through the years, like birthday cards, Valentine's Day cards, anniversary cards. And we've been together at this point for 28, 29 years. Lots of cards.
Hmm.
But I love, and this is part of savoring, I love opening that box. And I often do it on our anniversary, but just other random times too. I love opening that box and looking through all of those cards and remembering what we were experiencing and going through together at the time that we gave each other each of those cards, and what we wrote, and you just like savoring that history,
Hmm.
that we've built together. And doing that brings me so much joy. And that's a great thing to do if I'm mad at him.
That's good strategy.
Right, because it can
Yeah.
completely change how I'm feeling, because it gives me that jolt of
Hmm.
positivity, that I might need to reconnect,
Yeah.
to feel that love and that joy. And so, there are all kinds of things we can do to savor,
Hmm.
and it's really meaningful, and yeah, it's such a protective practice.
So how do people get started? What's like one thing you recommend to get started on this journey?
I mean, I think the foundation, we talked about it earlier, but the foundation is really self-awareness. So, spend some time, reflecting on your experiences in life, especially your childhood, how it shaped you in terms of how you show up with other people, whether or not that's serving you well. So, spending time in reflection is the first step because that will be the piece that gives you guidance on the next steps that you need to take and where you
Hmm.
need to focus your time and energy.
Wonderful. And the other first step is to buy the book, right? So
Sure, sure.
tell everyone where they can get the just out at the time of this recording. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fresh. So
Hot off the presses.
yes,
Yeah, so it is available on Amazon and anywhere books are sold, bookshop.org if you want to support your local booksellers. So anywhere that you buy books, you should be able to find it.
wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, Jamie. Good luck with it all.
Thank you, Dr. Dan, and thank you for having me.
Jamie has wonderfully blended her years of counseling with her years of leadership and executive coaching into an approach that helps us see behind the lines, behind the curtains, so we can move forth with understanding and awareness in how we interact, how we engage, and do so in a way that is aligned with how we want to be. Here are 5 key takeaways from this conversation. Number 1, leadership begins with self awareness. Understanding your attachment style reveals unconscious patterns that directly impact how you live and lead. Number 2, your story matters. The narratives you carry from childhood can either limit or liberate your leadership, but you can always rewrite them. Number 3, secure leadership is built on trust in yourself and in others, allowing you to delegate, empower, and create environments where people flourish. Number 4, compassion is transformative. Starting with empathy for yourself opens the door to curiosity and compassion for those you lead. Number 5, positive emotion protects and sustains growth. Practices like savoring and gratitude aren't just nice to have, they're essential to staying grounded and resilient. Thank you for listening to the show. This is truly about living and leading, interchangeable for most of us in all of the different roles we have in our life. Please send this to anyone you think will benefit. Thank you for being a part of our amazing community, for your 5-star reviews. They really do matter. And don't forget, we have a new free growth path quiz. Go to www.drdanpeters.com/quiz to find out where you are on your growth journey and your growth type, with several resources to help you on your way. Remember, we have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.